The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
You know, it amazes me for a team that's had very few winning seasons over the last 30 years or so that there is still some panic over what happened on Sunday against a team that probably will be in the playoffs, could contend for the Super Bowl, and they lost by 1 point. Yeah, they blew a lead. Okay, happens in the NFL. I think everybody needs to get a grip, maybe with 24 hours to digest it. You have, but it's time to turn the page. Here come the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday night. It's a game they can win. And if they win, oh boy, everything changes. Wow. Look, you got the Cowboys who are dead. We'll get to their mess coming up shortly. The Eagles, we don't know. You know, maybe if you split with them, you're in great shape. And with 7 games to go, if they win 2 of them, they could get in the playoffs. If they win 3 of them, I think they're certainly in the playoffs. And if they win 4, it'll be the first 11-win season since they won the Super Bowl. So let's all take a deep breath. And as Aaron Rodgers used to say about his Packers, relax. I don't know whether he said that about the Jets. Nobody can relax about that situation. But come on, let's get the chin up and move on. Dan Quinn had his news conference yesterday. Has that every Monday. He's going to have another one today because what happens when you play on Thursday night is you move everything up for the week. So Tuesday becomes like a Wednesday, Wednesday becomes like a Thursday, and Wednesday they're flying out to Philadelphia anyway. How about that, flying to Philadelphia? Seems like you could take a bus or a train, but okay, they're gonna fly there and play the game on Thursday night. The question, I think, lingering from the game, and I guess if you would have asked it after the game, Quinn would have had to say, I'm going to look at the film or I'm going to think about it. But question going into this game against the Eagles is, what's going to happen with your punt return? I think most of us came out of that game on Sunday feeling that Olamide Zaccheaus has got to be replaced. He took 2 of them off the face mask. That's basics. You catch the ball with your hands, not with the face mask. One of them, Commanders were able to recover. The second one, they did not, and that was a costly turnover. So Quinn asked yesterday about who he's going to keep there at punt returner. He said, it's Zaccheaus.
I am confident in him, and knowing that, to have one come out and, on the possession and lose that one, that's a big deal. But the guy's working incredibly hard at it, and don't have any change into that space as we're heading into this game.
And Quinn does seem to be kind of an arm around your shoulder type of coach. And I know that he was very, very consoling of Johnny Newton for jumping off sides. And that seems to be his style. Though he did say yesterday, and I haven't seen any of this because you hear, he's got fire and all that. He does seem to have a lot of enthusiasm, but we've yet to see him chew anybody out. He may do it in his office. He may do it in front of the team in a team meeting. But as far as, the way he's comported himself, it looks like he's kind of like your dad, right? He's kind of looking after everybody. He talked about his way of approaching it. And this is, every coach has a different way of doing this. Jimmy Johnson used to say, I got 53 guys. I got to coach them 53 different ways. He says if a backup tackle falls asleep in a meeting, I cut him. If Troy Aikman falls asleep in a meeting, I say, wake up Troy. So there's different ways of doing things. But this was Quinn on how styles differ with coaches and with players.
Not one size fits all. And someone you need to, put an arm around and tell them, personally, hey, this is what we saw and this is what I've seen and this needs to change. And there's others in front of the team, hey, this isn't you, this isn't what we need, and that's both fine. But getting to know what each player needs is important. The good news is, Candy, here we do have a standard about things. And so that applies to every player on the roster. So if something's not to our standard that we said, that's all of our responsibilities to say that to them. Now, you don't have to be a jerk in the way that you say it, but you do have to say it. You just can't overlook something that was incorrect or something that isn't to the standard. You can't look the other way. I want to make sure I'm clear with you on that. But so you do have to say it. But That doesn't mean you have to make the person feel small or act like a jerk when you're doing it, but you do have to get it corrected.
Yeah, and I don't know coaches who would necessarily make players feel small. I know Bill Parcells had sort of an abrasive way of doing things, but he always made sure he had really good coordinators around him. And, that's one of the things. I remember talking to Matt Millen about this years ago, why Norv Turner was a failure as a head coach, by and large. I mean, he ultimately took the Chargers to the AFC Championship game, but didn't work out for him here. Dysfunctional organization with Dan Snyder for sure. He went to Oakland for a couple of years. That didn't work out. Got his third shot with San Diego and got them to the playoffs. But Millen said this. He said, Norv has an assistant coach mentality. And the way it works with assistant coaches in most cases is that when the head coach chews out the player, it's the job of the assistant coach to put his arm around the player and get him back on track. He said what Norv would do is he would chew out a player, but then he'd come around later and put his arm around him. He said, you can't do that. You got to leave that up to other people. So different ways that people coach. And, so far so good here with Quinn. He did take an Atlanta team to a Super Bowl. Though things kind of collapsed after the team collapsed in that Super Bowl, losing the 28-3 lead. But it's been interesting to watch him. And I was thinking about this too. I've covered Hall of Fame coaches, covered in a way that meaning that I went to a lot of news conferences. When I was in Dallas, it was Tom Landry. When I was in New York, Bill Parcells, and here both eras, mainly the first one, Joe Gibbs. All three of them are in the Hall of Fame, three of the greatest coaches of all time. Between the three of them, that's 7 Super Bowls, 2 for Landry and 2 for Parcells and 3 for Gibbs. So that's a lot of success there. And each of them had different styles. But Parcells was the one I thought who treated the media kind of like he treated the players. He'd choose somebody out, and then he'd, come back later and say, hey, how about those Red Sox or something like that. He always kept you like on your toes in the media. And Quinn doesn't really do that. He addresses every reporter by name. He'll say, that's a fantastic question. It makes you feel good when you're talking to him. And, he doesn't really say a whole lot. He says what he needs to say. He doesn't reveal a whole lot. But he's got, a relationship that he's built up now over the course of, almost a year. In which he's, I don't think anybody has ever written anything negative about him. Not that there is anything negative to write at 7-3 off a team that won 4 games last year, but just very interesting to watch his coaching style. As for what they're facing in Philadelphia on Thursday night, they go into this as 3.5-point underdogs, and it is what you play for. I mean, this is what the NFC East used to be about. You're going into a hostile place in a night game at Philadelphia where the fans are going to be lubed up, and it's going to be a lot different than any game that's played at FedEx Field because everybody here is going to be wearing green. This is Quinn on that yesterday.
I don't know if it's bigger than any other, but I'm fired up about it. I can tell you that, Sam. It's cool. It's like better than the alternative of like not talking about big games. So like this is what like division games should be, man. Like an absolute blast, like Philadelphia and Washington battling for it. Like hell yeah, like more. So, but it's not, I don't look too far down the road, man. It's like just this game. Last week I did the same thing to say it wasn't about 2 games in 11 days. It was just this game, just this matchup. And honestly, that's where I see it again. Division games are awesome, man. They're fun. They're a battle. You know them well. They know you well, although we haven't played yet. A lot of players know one another's, scheme and technique, pretty closely.
I guess, is there anything differently that you feel like you have to do coming out of a stinging loss where guys are mad to make sure that they're mentally focused and ready to go?
Yeah, I think they're responding. That's the important part. And so seeing that part begin already last night, Sam, I thought that was a good sign to know that, they're mad. And this game getting here this week can't get here quick enough. So every once in a while, that short week's not such a bad thing. We'll be on a plane here and by Wednesday and get to go battle again in a really tough, good environment against an excellent team. So that'll get your attention and response awful quick.
Yeah, and it is awful quick because you just have a few days to get ready for it. And as far as how he thinks his team will respond to the loss to Pittsburgh and then turning around and playing at Philly,
they'll be itching to play. I can promise you that. You have that taste where you're just mad, honestly. This team, I don't know if I've seen a team have as much fun together. So that connection, like they've captured the part, John, of like you got to work really hard and you got to go absolutely, go for it in the biggest way. But they can also like joy hard too. And so those the two things that jump out to me. This team balls hard, but they also joy hard for one another. And not every team has that. And so I do think they've connected and bonded quickly. And that's why I think there's more under the hood for us, to go to a deeper spot because of that connection, to one another.
And maybe a little bit coincidentally, it was 34 years ago today that we had the famous body bag game in Philadelphia where 9 Redskins got knocked out of the game and Brian Mitchell had to finish up at quarterback. And while that was an ugly mess for the team, they got their revenge later on when they met in the wild card matchup, and the Redskins went back to the vet and easily beat the Eagles. In fact, Buddy Ryan, with I think 2 seconds left on the clock, walked off the field in what turned out to be his last game in Philadelphia. So, you never know what's going to happen over the course of a season. This is the first of 2 games against the Eagles, and crazier things have happened. Could there be a third game down the road if, in fact, both teams are in that position in the postseason? It's late in the season in some regards in that they've played 10 games, but it's also very early in the season because this is when the rubber starts to meet the road. How often do we talk? Wouldn't it be great to have meaningful games in December? Well, this year we're going to have meaningful games in December. And that's a really good thing, and it can become in many ways more meaningful if Washington can go to Philadelphia on Thursday night and win. I got some pushback yesterday on this on Twitter. The story came out that Jack Del Rio, remember he was fired here after the Commanders got their doors blown off in Dallas on Thanksgiving Day, and Ron Rivera finished up the season as the defensive coordinator. And I don't think we ever heard from Del Rio after that, but he did resurface in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, working for Luke Fickell as a defensive advisor, not really a coach, but, I guess in meetings and tape and things like that. So last week, Del Rio was arrested for driving drunk as he drove his car into a stop sign and through a fence and finally came to a stop in somebody's yard in Madison, Wisconsin. And the report said he showed signs of impairment after he was confronted by officers near the crash site. And I put this out on Twitter. It was low-hanging fruit, but I said, yeah, maybe he told the officer it was just a dust-up. And the pushback I got from people, you're making it political. No, it's not political. People died as a result of what happened at the Capitol January 6th, okay? That was crime, and many, many people have pleaded guilty to the crimes they committed that day and are still in jail awaiting maybe being pardoned by the new president, who knows. But it was not political, and it's amazing that people get so worked up about this. Okay, I took a cheap shot, maybe so, but Del Rio was fined $100,000 by the organization. He took his Twitter account down and, never talked about it again. So I don't know what becomes of his career. But to paint Jack Del Rio as a good guy, when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs in 1987 as a player and they had the strike, he beat up Otis Taylor, who was a Chiefs legend. I think borderline Hall of Famer, as far as I'm concerned, one of the key factors in them winning in the Super Bowl in 1970. Beat him up. He later settled. It was a civil suit. He settled the damages on that. Not a good guy. Not a good guy at all. Did a decent job as defensive coordinator here for a while, but not last year, and got fired. And I don't care who you are, whether you're liberal, conservative, or whatever your views are, if you drive drunk, you should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. How many families are still grieving family members who died as a result of drunk drivers? So let's not just excuse this over political matters here. And let's not look at this like, you're picking on him because of his political views. No, I'm picking on him because of his stupidity in driving drunk and the dangerousness of that, on top of the fact that he took a look at a crime, one of the biggest crimes we've ever had in this country, where millions of dollars of damage was caused to the Capitol of the United States of America, and 4 police officers committed suicide, and another woman died who was trying to break into the Capitol. That's crime. That's not politics. That's crime. And to say that was just a dust-up was despicable. And I would have fired him from the organization at the time. They chose not to. But ultimately, he was fined, and he apologized, and things moved on. But he's obviously got some personal issues here, and the best thing that can happen is he's kept off the road. If in fact he's convicted of drunk driving, he should have his license revoked, because people die, and it's not always the driver that dies in these horrific drunk driving accidents. So, let's not minimize this, and let's not make it political, because it's not. It's a crime. It's a crime, as was January 6th. All right, let's get to the mess of the Dallas Cowboys. It's always good if your rivals are failing while you're succeeding. And the Cowboys got a real mess on their hands. Louis Riddick, terrific analyst for ESPN, on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show to pick apart what's going on with the blasted Cowboys. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Boy, can one play change the fortunes of 2 teams. The Hail Mary pass that Jaden Daniels threw and was caught by Noah Brown to end that Chicago Bears game. It hasn't necessarily ignited the Commanders, though they did win the following week at New York. And, okay, they lost a tough game on Sunday to a really good Pittsburgh Steelers team. But the Chicago Bears, who were trending up, coming off a win in London, they had a bye week. They were looking good with their rookie quarterback. It looked like he turned the corner, Caleb Williams. Well, since that game, the Bears have gone 23 consecutive possessions without scoring a touchdown. Their 277 yards per game ranks 3rd worst in the NFL. And just breaking now, they have fired Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. Now, that's just a Band-Aid. This is going to end for Matt Eberflus at the end of the year. The Bears don't like to fire coaches in the middle of the season. They're known as kind of a cheap organization. Not that it costs you a lot more money to do that, but that seems to be where they're going to go. And really, it doesn't do a lot of good to fire a coach during a season. But offensive coordinator is out. And later this hour, I'm going to play an angry call from a post-game caller after yet another loss. A loss to a bad team. They lost to a bad New England team at home and didn't score a touchdown. And that is an absolute mess, which is why I believe that the Bears are going to offer Cliff Kingsbury a blank contract. Just fill in the amount, because they got to fix Caleb Williams. This is supposedly a once-in-a-lifetime quarterback who's trending now downward in a big way, that they're talking even about benching him. I don't know if that's going to happen, but nobody thought it would get to this at this point in the year. I mean, he looked like, okay, he had the growing pains that you expect with a rookie quarterback. He was playing well, and now he's playing terribly. He looks like he's regressed in a big way. And so today, Shane Waldron got the boot, and that will only set the stage for when they fire Matt Eberflus at the end of the year. Meantime, you have the Dallas Cowboys mess. And we will get to the comments of Micah Parsons both after the game on Sunday and what he said yesterday on his podcast. But there's also the issue of the sunlight that goes into the stadium there, and the Jerry Jones defiantly saying he's not going to put up curtains. Why don't you just tear down the whole damn stadium, And the big thing is that the Cowboys were down only 7-3. It looked like they had CeeDee Lamb open for a touchdown in the end zone. The sun got in his eyes, and he's not necessarily throwing Jerry Jones under the bus, but they do put up curtains for concerts and other events. Why couldn't they do that there? It's one of the many things that has caused the Cowboys to be a complete mess. And Louis Riddick, who does an excellent job as an analyst for ESPN, formerly in the front office of the Redskins, on Dan Patrick's show yesterday, looking at the CeeDee Lamb situation as symptomatic of what's going on in Dallas.
It's a real thing if a wide receiver can't. It's not like CeeDee Lamb's going, well, I'm just kidding. I can see it. I just dropped it. No, it's a problem. It's an issue. Jerry says, well, we've known that, where the sun comes in, and you guys have known you need to be able to adjust accordingly. And I'm not going to change my stadium for the sake of, the wide receivers having to catch the ball. I mean, Like the fact that this is even a discussion is just so. It's kind of like number 1,150 on the list of things that you probably could get to before you get to that. But with Dallas, I guess everything's fair game.
Can you get to the point where Jerry would actually make a change during the regular season at the head
As
coaching
far as-
position?
You know what? Yeah, I mean, you would think any other owner could, any other owner would be seriously considering it right now, especially considering, look, I mean, you may take Micah Parsons' comments out of context as far as him saying that Mike McCarthy can do whatever the hell he wants, blah, 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 blah. But what that says is this. Have you heard any other player say that kind of thing about their head coach? And when they're in the midst of having some kind of downturn or facing some kind of adversity, just basically dismiss whether or not their head coach is there or not? You don't hear some of the things that you hear coming out of that place as far as like just the overall explosiveness of the rhetoric that comes from in the locker room. And if you're Jerry Jones, you have to listen to that. You have to be listening and going, okay, wait a second here. Despite me always feeling as though I have all the answers because I have my finger on the pulse of this team better than anyone, damn it, I'm the one who owns it. I'm the one who paid X amount of dollars for it, and look how much it's worth now. So I must know something. Well, you clearly don't know, really, like right now in 2024, probably what your team needs the most. And then we could kind of start peeling it back from there, Dan. Because one of the hardest things to do as an organization is to self-scout and really know where your strengths and weaknesses are, because you have natural blind spots. That team has more than blind spots. It has like blind chasms as far as what's going on with their own team. And for him to not like maybe even consider that kind of thing right now, it's just more evidence of that. And it's too bad because they have some very good pieces that when you're just looking at basic team construction that you need, they have. But it's all the other stuff that just continues to go wrong with that football team.
But you're starting to hear players say it now, maybe the things that the quiet part out loud. You got the Bears with what's going on with Matt Eberflus as he lost the locker room. Like those are really powerful things that are said. And I don't know, as a former player, but also working in two front offices, how does that resonate when it gets to the front office when players are wondering and outwardly questioning the coach?
Yeah, look, I can speak to it from both sides, right? I mean, when you don't have the number one thing that players want is for them to be led by people who are competent and that are making them better. They don't care how old you are, don't care what you look like. They don't care about anything other than, are you making me better? And when they don't feel like you're making them better, that's when you lose them. That's when they start going, hey, you know what? The coach told me to take this on with my inside shoulder and kind of contain this run. You know what I'm going to do, though? I'm going to spill this run because I feel as though I could make the play. And then next thing you know, you compromise everything. When you start questioning everything like that, and see, that's what starts happening. Because that's what really matters. You don't have to like the coach, but you have to respect them. And you have to believe that they're teaching you things that are going to, one, make you individually better and help you win games. Clearly, that's starting to become a problem at the locker room level, which is the most important level because you don't have a shot. When you're upstairs and you're hearing this and you're starting to get, some idea that that's what's happening, you better start circling the people up, meaning your head coach, your coordinators, and your team leaders on the leadership council and going, hey, look, is this a thing? Is this a real thing? And is there a way for us to kind of like bandage this thing till the end of the season where we can really get together and I can really peel this back and look at it? Because if it really is, and if you're really in it to win games, then what the hell's the sense of standing pat if you feel as though that's already a big giant crap ball that's rolling downhill and is not going to stop? What's the point of keeping it that way when you know you're probably going to make a change at the end of the year anyway?
Yeah.
I don't know. Jerry always seems very reluctant to do that, and he's very methodical. And he likes to march to his own beat and stuff. And it's just
the Bears don't make midseason changes at coach either, coaching position.
But that's a foregone conclusion, man. I mean, there's just no way that stays the same. But I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, that place is it's sad what's happening there.
Okay, how much of a hall pass do you give Caleb Williams?
You give him some. because he's a rookie quarterback who at this point in time is still in the early developmental phase of his career at the NFL level. And look, there are certain things that he can control. There's also certain things that you're responsible for as a coach when it comes to his overall development. And you're obviously seeing that, look, there's that old axiom, right? You're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. Well, they're allowing some of those bad habits that he had in his game start to actually increase. And now he's looking like he's regressing.
Okay, but how do you get that out of his game? We saw that with Josh Allen. Josh Allen came with bad habits, and it took him a couple of years to get rid of those bad habits.
You're right. And you know what? Same conversation right now is being had about Anthony Richardson, right? And so I don't, there's no question Caleb Williams is not all of a sudden a lost cause. But what happens is, see, there's going to be two phases to it. One, you better self-scout your own organization and go, look, is Shane Waldron, our offensive coordinator, is he the guy in the first place? And is Matt Eberflus overseeing it all? Is he the guy? Was he ever the guy, either? What else is going to happen is Caleb's going to have to go outside, just like Josh Allen did, and seek some other tutoring, mentorship, development to where he can really break down his game to the most minute level. What do I need to improve on? How can I, get my mind to kind of really lock into some repeatable mechanics so I'm constantly, consistent with my lower body, my upper body, put the ball where I need to, and I can and there's just so much muscle memory that in the most critical moments I'm going to be consistent, because right now he's not. Those are the kind of things that Josh did. Sean McDermott was very diligent in terms of trying to continuously tweak his roster and his coaching staff to help Josh out. And next thing you know, Josh really dispelled all those other preconceived notions that you had about quarterbacks, which is, well, if you're inaccurate in college, you're going to be inaccurate. You can't fix that. It's BS. It's not true. You can. That's what ticks me off the most about this Anthony Richardson conversation right now. You see objectively, you look at the stats, him and Josh are the same people through 10 starts. But people are now saying, well, because he tapped out, which was a BS move, you can't do that. But should you now all of a sudden throw dirt on the kid and go, his career's done? Look at his stats. That's stupid. He's not done. But the Colts, you better look inward. That's for sure. And Anthony, you better have – I know he's already working. He already has a private quarterback coach. He already has people that he's working with. You better go back to the drawing board. And you better never – and he's going to have to work twice as hard now to dispel this whole idea of people thinking he's a quitter.
But there are –
That's what's haunting him more right now than anything.
But, Lewis, there are situations. Arizona moved on from Josh Rosen after 1 year, and it was the right decision. So
True.
Sometimes you have to admit, a lot of times GMs and owners will double down and say, nope, trust us. He's really – like Daniel Jones, the Giants doubled down. And it's cost them dearly, and it's going to cost their coach and GM their job.
That's Louis Riddick yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. Update since that conversation, Shane Waldron has been fired as the Bears offensive coordinator, as they're really flopping around now with this Caleb Williams regression here, trying to fix it. And what's going to happen over the last, they got 6 or 7 games left to go. We'll see. But this is not something that they had hoped would happen, because when you take a quarterback number one, you got to make sure you got the right offensive coordinator. And they thought they had that in Shane Waldron, and obviously it didn't work. They have now gone 2 games without scoring a touchdown. They're near the bottom of the league in yards per game. And if they don't watch out, you're going to have a massive bust on your hands in Caleb Williams. They're a long way from that, and he's shown some promise this year. And they're going to ride this thing as long as they can. But they got to get this right. And this is why I believe that the Bears will go to Cliff Kingsbury at the end of the season after they fire Matt Eberflus, and they say, how much is it going to take to get you here? Because we got to fix this quarterback. You don't get these guys very often. Once in a lifetime situation. They're very shrewd in how they dealt with the Carolina Panthers to be in the position to take him. But when it's gone this way, you're staring down the barrel of losing what could be one of the all-time great prospects. I mean, somebody that has maybe Hall of Fame potential, long way away from reaching that. But look at what's happened here with Jaden Daniels in a short period of time. And look at the Caleb Williams mess now with the Chicago Bears. We had 2 college football coaches pass away in the last 24 hours, both of them coaches of blue blood programs, but very different results. John Robinson and Jerry Faust both passed away at the age of 89. And when you look at John Robinson, he's unusual. There haven't been many like him. Pete Carroll is the only coach, I think I'm right about this, the only coach to win a national championship in college football and a Super Bowl. And he certainly had success in both college football and the NFL. That would be the ultimate, by the way, in each of them. Nick Saban didn't do very well a couple of years with the Miami Dolphins, but as a coach in college football, he may be the best of all time. John Robinson succeeded at both, won national championships at USC, and was the winningest Rams coach until just recently when Sean McVay broke his records only last month. But he was there for 9 years, and that was bookended by 2 stints at USC. And at USC, he went 104, 35, and 4, and went 75 and 68 with the Rams, and they were usually contending. They played the Redskins a couple of times, I believe, in the 1980s when Washington was on its way to Super Bowls. And McKay was very, very well respected. He kept up the USC tradition, which had been started by McVay, actually, by not Sean McVay, but John McVay, who was the coach. He coached O.J. Simpson, and they had Heisman Trophy when it became running back U. They had Charles White and they had Marcus Allen. Both those guys coached by John Robinson, who grew up as a childhood friend of John Madden. They grew up in the Bay Area. They graduated from high school in 1954. And John Robinson played tight end on Oregon's 1958 Rose Bowl championship team, got into coaching. I think, if I'm not mistaken, John Madden had also gone to Oregon, but found it too big, went to a small school in California, got drafted by the Eagles, hurt his knee, never played in the NFL, but he also obviously became a great coach as well. I mean, think about that. Two guys who grew up in the neighborhood as buddies, went to high school together, and both of them go into coaching and do incredibly well. Both of them Hall of Fame coaches. I don't think John Robinson would get in the NFL Hall of Fame, but he's in the College Hall of Fame, and John Madden, of course, is in the Hall of Fame as both a coach and a broadcaster. He became, this is Robinson, he became John McKay's offensive coordinator at USC in 1972, and he was part of the consensus national championship team in 1974, left for 1 year to join Madden with the Raiders, but went back to USC in 1976 when McKay took over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and was highly regarded, a lifer as a coach long after his legacy was cemented at USC and UCLA. He went and coached at UNLV from 1999 to 2004. And as a matter of fact, he coached Scott Turner. Scott Turner was a backup quarterback there, and then, of course, became the offensive coordinator here for the first couple of years, first 3 years, I guess, under Jack Del with the administration here before. And then he got into broadcasting and so forth. But really highly regarded guy, and obviously highly successful as both a college coach and a pro coach. And then you have Jerry Faust, who is considered to be one of the most likable people around. He is someone that was someone, he passed away at 89, but was incredibly well liked, but turned out to be a terrible head coach. And sometimes when you think outside the box, it works really well, and sometimes when you think outside the box, it becomes a disaster, as it was with Jerry Faust. He had been an incredible high school coach at Moeller, one of the top high school programs in Ohio. He had records there that had him recognized as the greatest high school coach maybe ever. At Moeller, he went 178, 23, and 2. His teams won 5 Ohio State championships in his final 6 years. 4 times they were declared mythical national champions. That's how good he was. And he had sent a number of stars to play at Notre Dame, including Bob Crable, Tony Hunter, Tim Cagle was a quarterback. They were all there when he got there. And I'm sure they gave him high recommendations. And they had just gone through the Dan Devine era. Dan Devine may be more famous for his role in Rudy, when he wouldn't put Rudy in the game until the fans started chanting Rudy, which actually didn't happen, but he was a part of that. So he left, and in comes Jerry Faust. They think, okay, there's a lot of really good coaches around the country, but we're going to tap into something that could work out like gangbusters. Well, this is almost like what happened with Steve Spurrier when he came to the NFL. Faust didn't really have any familiarity with college coaching. His background was in high school coaching. He's relatively young. He's 45 years old. And he was, in Notre Dame terms, a disaster. He was there for 5 years. He went 30, 26, and 1. His first and final teams went 5 and 6, the first losing seasons for Notre Dame since 1963. They did have a couple of winning records in between. But his last game at Notre Dame was a complete disaster. They lost to Miami 58-7. That ended a string of 3 straight losses to close out the season. And he resigned at the end of the year. As the story goes, he saw Tim Brown crying because they weren't going to fire him. They were not going to fire him. They were going to honor his contract and let him coach it out. It was a 6-year deal. But he saw Tim Brown crying after the game. He said, I can't subject him to that again. He got another shot to coach at Akron, coached there for 9 years, 86-94, had a losing record there as well. And, you take a coach from USC, you take a coach from Notre Dame. Those have 2 of the greatest football legacies in history. Certainly John Robinson upheld it. Jerry Faust failed doing it, but both of them regarded as fine men, good people, and both of them dying, I guess, within a 24-hour period, both at the age of 89, Jerry Faust and John Robinson. Meantime, if you're just jumping in your car, not that this, I guess, is unexpected with the incredible collapse of the Chicago Bears. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, coming to Washington, they were part of a great story in the NFC North. Every team had a winning record. It's the latest in a season that everybody in the division had a winning record. Now there are 3 teams with a winning record. Detroit continues to win despite 5 interceptions the other night by Jared Goff. They won. They're 8-1. Minnesota survives. They're 7-2. Green Bay 6-3. Chicago now 4-5. They have lost 3 straight games, and in the last 2 have failed to score a touchdown, and they fired Shane Waldron today to, I guess, put a Band-Aid on the bleeding. But after losing to the lowly New England Patriots on Sunday, when they did not score again, except for a field goal, lost the game 19-3. So they lost a lopsided game to a really bad team. I did these shows for years and years, and I did them after losses where everybody wanted to fire the coach, including the hosts. I did most of these shows with Joe Jacoby. I worked with John Riggins, Monty Coleman, Eric Williams. Doc Walker and I did shows for a long time. George Stark and I did shows. And it was always, the same thing, angry fans. But when you mix in the accent of the Bears, it really adds to it. And this was a caller to the postgame show on The Score in Chicago after the Bears laid an egg at home against the New England Patriots.
Go back to the phone lines. Bill is on the Northwest side. Bill, welcome to The Score. How are you?
I'm pissed off. That's how I'm doing. I mean, what we saw today was a disgrace. I am very happy, and I want to disagree with Olin 100%. I am glad the Bears players came out and said that the coaches were incompetent. I mean, for Matt Eberflus to come back after the Washington game and say that the second play before the play before the Hail Mary had nothing to do with them losing is BS. That's number one. Okay? And then come out today again against the team and get slaughtered at home. Now you're facing the Packers, Minnesota, and Detroit back-to-back weeks. And you expect this, and tomorrow morning he's going to go and meet the Bears media, and he's going to say we had a meeting and everything is great, and we're all on the same page. Well, what page are they on? He's full of crap. He should be fired right this minute. And what he did to Caleb Williams again today, under 2 minutes, losing by 16 points, and he's getting the crap kicked out of him. And he leaves him in the game to get his head bashed in. I hope Caleb Williams' father tonight, I hope he tweets something so bad that it gets Matt Eberflus fired.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate the phone call and the passion.
I think that's everybody in Chicago right now.
Yeah, I think it's everybody.
Bears, Packers, Lions. Yeah. I've always felt like the callers are part of the fabric of what you do, especially in these post-game shows. And coincidentally, yesterday, this is like out of the blue, on Twitter, I heard from Slope. Slope was a great caller for a long time on the post-game shows. And, he really did a good job of giving you the flavor of the anger of the fans. And he's a diehard fan, and I kind of teased him when he reached out to me on Twitter. I go, "Oh, now they're winning. Now I hear from you." He said, "No, I've been looking for you for a long time." He said, I have never left. And, to have stuck through it through the years where apathy set in, it's pretty remarkable that he's that loyal of a fan. But think about this guy, Bill from the North Side, who's so angry he's almost crying as he's talking about the team, and he wants to sort of weaponize the dad. Now, remember, the dad was the one, and some said, well, maybe he's going to scare some people away. Remember, the dad said something to the effect like they might want part ownership of a team. And something else that, and I go back to the beginning here on this one. First of all, Louis Riddick, who went to every pro day of the top quarterbacks coming out, and he said, if I had the number one pick, I'd take Jaden Daniels. I would let Caleb Williams slip to number 2. That wasn't the popular opinion. The Bears went with what most people thought would happen. They took Caleb Williams number 1. But here's something that I noted, and I think we're looking at this now in a way that it's probably a very difficult situation for the Bears. Probably the best thing for Caleb Williams right now is to bench him. Don't subject him to any more of this. He was getting clobbered. I think he took 9 sacks against a New England defense, which isn't that good. And they're going to get this guy really hurt. And you remember in the beginning of minicamp, rookie minicamp, Eberflus named Caleb Williams the starting quarterback. Now, we knew it was going to ultimately end that way, but there was really no need to do that other than for ego. And Mike Shanahan did the same thing with Robert Griffin III in the 2012 offseason before the season. And he did it because RG3 was insecure about them taking Kirk Cousins in the 4th round. And that was somebody who would compete with him for the job. What do you mean I'm not the number 1? So just to soothe everything over, make sure his ego is okay, Shanahan named him the starter. You'll notice that Jaden Daniels, with Marcus Mariota here, competed for the job, said he was completely comfortable competing for the job, and actually was appreciative of the fact that he competed for the job and won the job and has played great. I mean, if Sunday was his worst day as a pro, they're going to happen and you're going to take that. He didn't seem to be 100%. He probably is not 100% physically because of the rib injury. This little mini bye that's coming up after the Philly game is probably going to help him. He won't have to play for about 10 days, so that should be good. But, I think what's happening here is you got a quarterback who's on his way to being ruined, and can he be saved? The Bears have a long history of ruining quarterbacks. And if this one gets ruined, a quarterback who's supposed to be once in a lifetime, who's been on the radar since he was a 9th grader at Gonzaga and beat DeMatha on a Hail Mary touchdown pass at the end of the game, and you got an organization that's like melting down around him, that's a mess. That's a real mess. And I think, if you're looking for flavor, you get it there with that call. That's a really good call. As we say in the biz, good call. Rack, or as Jim Rome used to say, great call. Rack that. But, yeah, that's the lifeblood of post-game shows, and good for Bill from the Northwest Side for expressing that. All right, coming up, Tony and Mike weighed in on the Commanders and the Steelers from Sunday. We got that, plus the whole Micah Parsons mess with the Dallas Cowboys. Again, nothing is better when you're succeeding than your enemies failing at the same time. And we'll get to the Dallas mess and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. 34 years ago today, Brian Mitchell played quarterback for the Washington Redskins. Yes, he was a kick returner, and he was a running back, but they ran out of quarterbacks. The famed body bag game in Philadelphia at Veterans Stadium. We'll look back on that, and more importantly, the aftermath of that, the revenge that the Redskins got against those same Philadelphia Eagles in the same stadium where they carted off 9 injured players on this night in 1990. We'll look at that. Also, more on the Cowboys, Michigas, and how about those Indiana Hoosiers? Not in basketball. They're usually there in basketball. No, these are the Indiana Hoosiers in football, and they are probably going to wind up with a better season than the basketball team. And I know pretty much the landscape in Bloomington, having sent my son there for 4 years, and his love affair with Indiana basketball. But this year, he's got a new girlfriend. It's called football. And Kirk Cignetti, who left James Madison to go to Indiana, has done a remarkable job in an unbelievably short period of time. Sure, the transfer portal helps, but everybody's got the transfer portal. He's made it work big time for him, and he's got a pretty nice, funny, dry sense of humor. We'll get to that. Meantime, follow-up from Sunday, Tony and Mike on PTI. It's always interesting to see what the Monday show looks like. They're both here to some, and Tony never leaves D.C. He doesn't even leave his house to do the show. Mike seems to shuttle between Washington and Chicago and Phoenix and Los Angeles, New York. I mean, he's all over the place. But he was actually in the studio yesterday in D.C. Tony was at his house. And they looked at the Commanders game from Sunday. And I think that they came away impressed, really, with both teams, even though one won and one lost.
Tone, what did you learn from the Steelers beating the Commanders?
Well, I learned, first of all, how much I hate the name Commanders, and I wish they would change that. That's number one. What did I learn about the Steelers? I learned again, Mike, that I was wrong about Russell Wilson, that Russell Wilson is still very good. It did not work out at all in Denver. It works out perfectly in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin put him in. The Steelers are 3-0 with Russell Wilson. They are averaging 383 yards of offense per game and 30 points per game. And with Justin Fields, they average 21. All right, now Russell Wilson didn't have the greatest day in the world, but he dropped it down the chimney to Mike Williams when he had to. He did that. The only thing that causes me to back off the Steelers a little bit actually is their upcoming schedule. They have 2 with Baltimore, 2 with Cincinnati. They got the Eagles and the Chiefs. That's a really tough schedule. What did I learn about Washington? They're legit as a playoff team. They're actually a good team at this point. They went toe-to-toe with a very good team. They were in there at the end of the game, right? Jaden Daniels has reason. He gives people in Washington, D.C., like you and I, he gives us hope. He does not turn the ball over, and he's very calm. And there's a lesson to be learned here in one other thing, that if you ever see a veteran quarterback under center on 4th and 1 late in the game, the defensive line coach has to say to his players who are rookies, it's a trick. Yeah. Don't fall for it. They're not gonna snap the ball.
Don't do it. Look at you're lined up right there. You got to look at the ball, which I hear great defensive players say. Tony, like you, I learned about. I'm glad this is confirmation about Russell Wilson, because I like to root against Sean Payton anyway, and that's cool because Sean Payton's a worthy dude. Sean Payton wears a championship ring. You can root against him. I do. He got rid of Russ. And Russ had a little bit left, and Mike Tomlin thought that. Yep. And that's why Mike Tomlin said at the beginning of the season, I continue with my NASCAR analogies, he's in the pole position, Russ is, and he put Justin Fields on the bench, and Fields handled it beautifully. It also reminds you that the Steelers understand who their coach is and who's running that show, okay? And Mike Tomlin says, we're going to be a little bit better. They can throw the ball down the field. Even when Russ isn't great, Tony, he's got touch on the deep ball. He can get down there. That's right. The Steelers have to feel they're a different kind of threat. And yes, I agree. With Washington, they are worthy. That was an even game. Even game is great.
So here's the thing about Washington. Washington, this has happened overnight. They are a much better team overnight. They were 4-13 last year. They changed coaches. They changed coordinators. They changed quarterbacks. They empowered the GM to bring in all new people.
Managed.
And now they're 7-3.
Owned all of it.
They are. It's 25 years of bad football gone in the snap of a finger.
Yeah, and who would have expected that? I mean, if this team was, instead of being 7-3, 3-7 right now, I don't think people would be too worked up about that. It was expected to be a rebuilding year. And the fact that it's turned over this quickly and the visions of Dan Snyder get further and further into the distance. I didn't think it would happen like this. I think right now, well, season has to play out. We'll see how it goes, but you'd have to give Adam Peters Executive of the Year, and you'd have to give Dan Quinn Coach of the Year. And the free agents that they brought in, I think this is a great lesson, too, because when Dan Snyder had money, he went shopping like in fantasy football. He brought in names, Deion Sanders, Bruce Smith, Jeff George, people like that. What they did here was they had a lot of money to spend. They didn't go after any real big-name free agents. They didn't get tempted when wide receivers wanted to come here and, things like that. What they did was they spent very wisely on players. And that's what happens if you have a good general manager who's got a grip on what he's doing instead of the coach-centric operation that they had here, which didn't work and never had a winning season, So that I think has been a big thing. But, yeah, I mean, it is remarkable how quickly things have turned around. And even after a loss, when fans are starting to panic a little bit, here you got these national guys with local understanding of the team saying, hey, we're kind of maybe not more impressed with a loss than a win, but this was a kind of a loss where you come away. And that's the way I feel about it. Like that was their worst game of the season as far as I'm concerned. I think you throw out the opener against Tampa because that was the first time that Jaden Daniels ever played in the NFL and a totally rebuilt roster. It was kind of like preseason. They don't play anybody in the preseason. Losing to Baltimore, team that's going to compete for the Super Bowl with a two-time MVP at quarterback. Maybe he's going to win a third one this year. And they lost a close game without Brian Robinson. That's not bad either. So, I think they're looking to be in great shape as they head into this game at Philadelphia. And if they win, watch out. People are going to really wig out. Meantime, you got the whole mess going on with the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys, who played a terrible game on Sunday, lost again and lost in a big way, 34-6 at home to the Philadelphia Eagles, which led Micah Parsons to say this when asked about the future of his head coach, Mike McCarthy.
Mike can leave and go wherever he wants, but the guys I kind of feel bad for is guys like Zach Martin and guys who might be on their last year or on their way out, because that's who I wanted to hold the trophy for. You want to win games and do great things with those type of legends who put in more time and work than Mike McCarthy ever did. So those are the kind of guys that I have so much sympathy and hurt for.
So it sounds like he's throwing the coach under the bus. And he's saying, he can get out of here, or I can. I got a contract. And he was lit up. He was lit up by guys like Rex Ryan on TV and others. And he didn't take well to it. We'll get to what he said about it on his podcast yesterday. But John Machada covers the Cowboys for The Athletic. He was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, which was guest hosted by Kirk Morrison, who played in the NFL with the Raiders, and he also played with the Bills. And this is Machada on the comments that Micah Parsons made and how they went over.
It's hard to, whether you read that quote or you listen to it and not thinking it's taking a little bit of a shot at Mike McCarthy, especially because of where he's at, final year of his contract. The team's obviously struggling. I don't think he meant it. I don't think he meant it as harshly as it sounds. But if you're Mike McCarthy and you hear that, there's no way you're pleased by that. And I get what he's saying about, Zach Martin putting in the work on the field as a player. Mike McCarthy's never played in the NFL, but he's a longtime NFL head coach. He's one of the winningest coaches in the NFL. He's won a Super Bowl. He's obviously put in a lot of work. And so I just don't think the timing's great for that. But that clip right there is exactly what the Dallas Cowboys are. Like, even when things aren't going well, there's always something else that comes along with it. And most teams aren't like that. Usually when most teams are 3-6, you stop talking about them. With the Cowboys, oftentimes nationally especially, they get leaned into.
Yeah, but John, it seems to me that a lot of people are saying that Mike McCarthy may have lost the locker room. To me, if anyone asks me a question about my head coach, even after a loss, I'm going to defend him if I know the effort, the time, everything that he puts in. You'll find ways to defend him. But to me, I thought that these comments by Micah Parsons were kind of indicative on what's going on behind the scenes in Dallas, that this is a locker room that may have lost faith in its head coach.
Yeah, and I can easily see how it would be interpreted that way, especially with the way that they're playing on the field. So, he has the right to clear that up. But with that clip, it's hard to sit there and say anyone's completely taking it out of context because of everything you just said. Things aren't going well. And so you're specifically asked about your head coach who is in the final year of his deal. That's not really what you want to hear if you're the coach or heck, if you're the front office or your other players in the locker room. I mean, that's arguably your most valuable player saying that. And so it's not a great look. And I'm interested to see what Micah says to try and clarify it. But to your point, maybe that is an example of things behind the scenes being worse than we think right now, because there haven't been many players that have said anything that along those lines to make you think that. But the product on the field looks that way, especially the product at home. I mean,
right.
There isn't a team. How do you go from winning 16 consecutive games over a 2 periods, and then all of a sudden you get blown out by the Packers in the playoffs and you've never recovered from that, and then you just continue to get blown out at home? Like the switch like that, no one in the Cowboys organization been able to put their finger on it, and that's the biggest question, and no one has an answer for it.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. We're talking to John Machota, Dallas Cowboys beat writer for The Athletic. I'm glad you brought that up. Is that it's not as if they lose games bad on the road, right? It's they're getting beat up at home. Like, you're supposed to be able to defend home, and they're not doing that. But that being said, John, with the news that Dak Prescott will end the season on IR, this is now a Cooper Rush, Trey Lance football team. I'm not so sure they can show me enough that Mike McCarthy will be awarded possibly another season, or they re-sign him back as the head coach. So I say, what are the Cowboys possibly playing for now at 3-6? Yes, I've seen teams come back from 3-6, but I don't know if this team has the ability to. So what am I looking at now with the Cowboys sort of moving forward?
Yeah, there's no reason for anybody to think that they're all of a sudden going to turn this around. This has been heading in this direction for a while. And again, to your point, like, there's levels to this. These aren't close losses where they're just not, a different play here and one less turnover there. Their last 2 home games, they've turned the ball over 5 times in each game. And so I understand that the Lions won last night doing that, that's very unconventional. You're not gonna win many games doing that. And so you have that going on. So it's then the fact that you want to go with the storyline of Cooper Rush is won games for them in the past.
Right.
But those teams in the past had a better defense. They had a run game. This team doesn't have that. There's no real signs to think that they're going to win any more than maybe 4 or 5 games this season. You look at the rest of the schedule, they got the Giants and they got the Panthers. Those are their 2 most winnable games. They should win those even with this team, but you can't tell me that that's even guaranteed. And beyond that, they won't be picked to win any of those other games, and they could get just as ugly as what the game was yesterday.
Well, what about next week in the Battle of the State of Texas, right? Dallas Cowboys at home taking on the Houston Texans. Okay, that's the one where it's always been the Cowboys have been, right, big brother, and Houston Texans your little brother. That's how Monday Night Football kind of feels like next week, John, that this could be one of those games where some decisions will have to be made, because I don't know what the Cowboys kind of do going forward the rest of the season. This is still a brand, but when you're putting that type of product out and you're looking at a team that has a young quarterback in CJ Stroud, I know they lost last night, but they've have an opportunity. They're going in the right direction, and yet the Cowboys may be going in the opposite direction. I think their next game is probably the most critical game of the season. If you win it, you're kind of still in it. You lose it, it's all about next season now.
Yeah. In terms of the first part of your question about, the big brother, little brother, I will say that just because it's pro football and the teams, the players, everybody changes so much, it isn't the same as, Michigan State, Florida State.
Okay.
But for Jerry Jones, it'll bother him a lot if they get destroyed by the other team in state in his building again. So that is one of those things where it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to that, because clearly the Texans are a better team right now. And there's no reason why anyone should pick the Cowboys to beat them. But I don't get the sense that there'll be many storylines from the players talking about how this is some big rivalry or anything like that. I think they're pretty frustrated that they can't get a win, that this thing is sliding in the wrong direction. They are getting some players back healthy, but the problem is even early on in the season, when they did have just about everybody, they were still getting blown out. And the worst one really is that game against the Saints. You got blown out at home against the Saints. You had all of these players we're talking about that were injured or are coming back. They were out there. You got destroyed by the Saints, and they were the first team to fire their head coach, and for a period of time didn't win another game until they fired their coach after that. And so that's the one that will stand out, of where there's really no coming back from that. I understand sports, crazy things happen. There's nothing crazy, Pat, that's about to change with this Cowboys season.
That's John Machado, covers the Cowboys for The Athletic. There is an update, by the way. It's official now that Dak Prescott is going to have surgery on the hamstring, so he's out for the year. He's done. And it's going to be Cooper Rush when the Commanders play them a week from Sunday at home. It's, things are lining up very nicely. I mean, you don't want to see a guy hurt, obviously, but big difference in facing Cooper Rush than Dak Prescott for Washington. Follow-up yesterday, and this was, I guess, after that conversation between John Machado and Kirk Morrison, who was filling in for Rich Eisen on his show. Parsons does a podcast, Parsons, and he was responding to the criticism of people like Rex Ryan and Damian Woody on ESPN for throwing his coach under the bus. I understand that Jerry Jones did his podcast today and defended the Micah Parsons comments, but this is how Parsons pushed back on the pushback from his comments of Sunday.
I never once threw or even intended to throw Mike McCarthy under the bus. Like I said, he's one of the most winningest coach. He is a Super Bowl champ. I never once brung up his past. And the question that was asked was about here in the Dallas Cowboys, did I see Mike McCarthy in our future? And I said, that's above my pay grade. So never once did I ever intended or wanted to reflect on Mike McCarthy's career because I always knew it was a good one. I've always had a great relationship with Mike McCarthy, and I never even put that in question. And for a guy like Rex Ryan, I just know he wanted to coach the Cowboys. Like, I'm perfectly happy that we have Zimmerman because if we have a guy that's willing to go on TV and provide this type of nonsense, imagine what he could do to a locker room.
Well, Rex Ryan's been a very good defensive coordinator. So is Mike Zimmer, but it's just a complete circus there, led by Jerry Jones, and I think he created this. And Micah Parsons feeling free to. You judge for yourself. I'll play this again. This is from Sunday. He said he didn't intend to. Well, intent and what you do are maybe two different things. Again, this was Parsons after the game on Sunday when asked about the future of McCarthy.
Mike can leave and go wherever he wants, but the guys I kind of feel bad for is guys like Zach Martin and guys who might be on their last year or on their way out, because that's who I wanted to hold the trophy for. You want to win games and do great things with those type of legends who put in more time and work than Mike McCarthy ever did. So those are the kind of guys that I have so much sympathy and hurt for.
Like, he kind of did bring up McCarthy's past. I mean, did more work than he ever did. He was a head coach. He won a Super Bowl in Green Bay. So I don't know. I'm glad it's happening in Dallas and not happening here. I mean, this team became so irrelevant during the last years of Dan Snyder that even something like that would have made everybody yawn. But in Dallas, whatever anybody does, that's a big deal. And ESPN feeds off of that, and they're probably having a lot of fun with what's going on with their situation. Coming up, it was 34 years ago today that we had the body bag game.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Rams coming up at 11 o'clock. I said Indiana football was 9-0. They were 9-0 going into the Michigan game. They won that game, so they've got two left. Ohio State a week from Saturday, and then the traditional closeout game against Purdue, and they should blow their doors off. So more than likely they're going to be in the playoff, and how high they go will depend on what they do against Ohio State, and that is a monumental game for a school that has judged its athletic success by the 5 national championships they won in basketball, 3 of them under Bobby Knight, and football's kind of an afterthought, as Curt Cignetti found out when he got there. Like, whoa, nobody seems to care about this, so I'm going to say Purdue sucks and Ohio State sucks too, and those are their last 2 games, and if he wins them both, watch out. All right, 34 years ago today was the famed body bag game, not the body bag bowl as it's sometimes referred to. It was a body bag game. It was a regular season game between the Redskins and the Philadelphia Eagles at the old vet where that was fuzzy concrete that they played on, that old artificial turf stadium, which was brutal. And the game was a lot different than it is now. And the Eagles played a brand of football which you could never get away with now. Buddy Ryan was their coach. He had built the great Bears defense, the defense that fueled the team to the Super Bowl when they beat the Patriots. And this was kind of a put up or shut up year for Buddy, who always talked big. and was expected to have the Eagles in contention for the Super Bowl that year. And on this night, it looked like he did. Now, let me give you a little background here. This was the 1990 season. It was the season before Mark Rippon led the team to the Super Bowl and was the Super Bowl MVP, and the jury was out on him. He was a journeyman guy at that point. He'd been drafted in the 6th round. Joe Gibbs was able to stash him on injured reserve for a couple of years while he learned the system, and he transitioned from Doug Williams. Doug Williams, of course, Super Bowl MVP after the 1987 season, but by 88 started to have some injuries, and 89 was his last year. And so Rippon became the starting quarterback in 1990, but he was injured. He was injured in the early part of that season, and Stan Humphries was the starting quarterback. And they played a game the week before this body bag game in Detroit, and they were down with about 10 and a half minutes to go in the third quarter, 35-14, and Stan wasn't getting it done. So Joe Gibbs turned to Jeff Rutledge, another journeyman guy. He'd been in the league a long time. He'd been a backup or third string with the Giants. He was the holder for Mark Mosley. So they really liked that about him. No, I'm sorry. He was a holder for Chip Lohmiller. There was that kind of chemistry with Chip Lohmiller, it looked like he was going to be a Hall of Fame kicker. He was that good, and his career kind of petered out somewhere down the road 3 or 4 years later. But anyway, so Rutledge comes in the game, and they're down 35-14, and he pulls off a miraculous comeback. They win the game in overtime, 41-38. So now for this Monday night game at Philadelphia, Gibbs names Rutledge the starting quarterback, which didn't turn out to be the honor that he thought it would. He got knocked out of the game fairly early, and so in came Stan Humphries to relieve him with Rippon still out with an injury, and he got knocked out of the game. In all, there would be 9 players for the Redskins carted off the field. And it got so bad late in the game with no quarterbacks left that they couldn't even use Brian Mitchell as a punt returner because he's now the starting quarterback. And they used a guy named Joe Howard. Joe Howard was from this area. He'd actually played basketball at Notre Dame and was a punt returner, and he got hurt, and they had to carry him off the field. The 9th player to be carted off. And finally, this is Al Michaels working with Dan Dierdorf on Monday Night Football on this night 34 years ago, explaining just how bad the situation was by the time Brian Mitchell came in to play QB.
Well, Mitchell's going to come into quarterback here, but this game is over as far as the Redskins are concerned. Been a real very difficult night for the Redskins in every way. Remember, Stanley got hurt, the punt returner, early on. Then Riggs went out with a sprained foot. Minuski went out. Humphries is gone. And now Howard.
Mozienko turned an ankle on a punt, and you wonder if that didn't play into the Redskins going for it on 4th down one time. Rutledge with his thumb. I mean, this has been just a disaster for the Redskins. And on top of all those things, they got outplayed by the Eagles.
Yeah, the Eagles won the game 28-14. The reason it was known as the body bag game is before the game, and again, it's a different game these days than it was 34 years ago, but Buddy Ryan said to reporters before the game, they'll have to be carted off in body bags. And then as the players were being carted off, one of the Eagles players said, "Do you guys have any more body bags?" And, Joe Gibbs, he didn't get mad very often, didn't show his anger very often, but he was really angry at Buddy Ryan after this game. So the best remedy for anger is revenge. And following this game, both teams were very good. Eagles won 4 of their last 7 with Randall Cunningham, finished the season 10-6, got the wild card, 4th seed in the NFC. The Redskins won 5 of their last 7. They also finished 10-6, but the Eagles had the tiebreaker, so the game was played in Philadelphia. And I remember this was a Saturday afternoon. It was probably the first playoff game of that weekend. The Redskins go to Veterans Stadium, and they beat the Eagles 20-6. They lost to San Francisco the following week, but that was a game where they, picked themselves up and said, we're going to do better the next year. And as a matter of fact, the following year, they pretty much ran the table. They almost went undefeated and wrapped up the Super Bowl with a win over Buffalo, and Rippon was the MVP. The thing about the revenge game, the playoff game that's remembered, and the story has been told many times, Art Monk didn't like to talk. Art Monk didn't do interviews with reporters, not because he was a jerk. He just didn't like to do them and was known for not saying anything. And they had a team meeting, and they said Art Monk got up and spoke, and that spoke volumes to the rest of the players. So when they went to Philadelphia, they were ready, and they beat the Eagles 20-6. And with like a couple of seconds left on the clock, Buddy Ryan walked off the field in what turned out to be his last game for the Eagles. There were some rule changes after this because of the emergency situation with Mitchell playing quarterback. They went back and forth. It's back now, called the emergency quarterback. But the following year, they said, okay, outside of the 45-man game day roster, the quarterback could be the emergency quarterback. So if the first two got hurt, he could play. The rule was changed again for the 2011 season when the game day roster was increased to 46, and now we have the emergency quarterback. But remembering the body bag game, and if you want to see how much football has changed, go watch some of the highlights of that, including when Joe Howard gets knocked out on the punt. He got ear-holed, helmet-to-helmet hit. Game was a lot different back then, and that game stands out for anybody who's a fan, particularly remembering the glory years, the 1980s into the early 1990s. That was something else. All right, that is a wrap for me. We'll have reaction on Wednesday that we don't usually have from the football team since they are treating it as a Wednesday since they're playing on Thursday. We'll get to all of that. Bram will have thoughts as well. He's next. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning starting at 9 a.m.